Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Character Clinic. My name is Karla,
And I'm Haley.
and we are mental health counselors in Texas. We are here to talk about our most relatable fictional characters and how we would work with them.
So, this week we're going to be talking about a really well known Netflix series called Wednesday. And we're going to start off with a couple of different ways that we're going to approach talking about these characters. Do you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, so we're going to do an intake with a character. We don't want to tell you guys who the character is yet, but we definitely will tell you after we've done the role play. We want you guys to try to guess who the character is as we're going along. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Haley?
I think it could be pretty fun to sit here and listen to an intake session and guess who the character is that we're going to be referring to. After our intake session, we're going to be sitting here and talking about the way that we as therapists would work with this client if we had that opportunity to. Um, in case you were wondering, what is an intake session? We are going to be talking about the very first time that you meet with a new therapist and the laundry list of questions that they might have for you to sit down and get to know your case and your needs and your goals to figure out how best they're going to work with you. So, we're going to go through the process of that experience with this mystery character while you try to figure out who we're talking about. And then we'll talk about what we would do in the future after that.
So I'm curious, Haley, what do you look for in an intake session? What kind of questions are you asking clients?
Well, we have really basic ones where I will confirm things that they mentioned in their intake paperwork. A lot of times there will be things that they've stated in answers to basic questions. What brings you in? Have you had previous therapy before? Tell me about your family history. There will be typical questions, and sometimes I'll get answers in those that I'd love to know more detail about. So I'll write down certain things that I can say, hey, I noticed you wrote this. Like, for instance, a recent one I might have had could have looked something like, oh, it asked about your relationship with your father. You wrote tense. Can you elaborate that on a little bit?
Hmm.
So something like that. I want to know a little bit more about what they have decided to share with me, what they would like to focus on. And then really, really typical stuff like presenting concerns, goals, what we're here to work on.
Yeah. Yeah. And presenting concerns are just the issues that you're coming to therapy with. So that's usually what we know about. And then we will ask you to elaborate on that. Um, so yeah, we are basing this episode on the very first episode of Wednesday. So if you want to go back to watch that first episode, you can. Or if you haven't watched that episode yet, you can go ahead and watch that before this or even after this. But we are basing our intake on that first episode.
And what's interesting is, just as a pause for people that haven't seen it, I'm about to mention something from it, so letting you know. But what is kind of funny, and what will not always be the case in the characters that we talk about throughout this series of this podcast, is that there is actually an intake session for a therapy appointment in this first episode. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and what we would maybe do similarly, but then very differently, because I don't think we have to tell y'all that therapy is not commonly well represented in media. So, this is our attempt to help provide a little bit more context to those kinds of things.
Yep, I completely agree. I'm wondering what character we're going to be doing today.
Well, if you wanted to get that intake started, I bet that could be something that you could figure out along the way.
Okay, so I am Karla. I am going to be your counselor. I already have your intake paperwork, so I know a little bit about what's going on, but I'd really like to hear more from you. However, before we really get into it, before I ask you some questions, I do want to tell you just a little bit about confidentiality. If you've done therapy before, you might have already heard about this, but for me, it's always really important to talk about it. So, confidentiality is really important, not just with adults, also with teens. And so, I want you to know what that looks like. So, the things that we talk about in here stay between me and you, but if I am worried about a suicide attempt, if I'm worried about harm coming to somebody else, um, or if I'm worried about either of those things, then I would have to break confidentiality. If I'm worried that there might be some sort of abuse going on, then I might have to break confidentiality as well. But I'm curious if you have any questions about confidentiality.
Well, considering that I'm forced to be here, I'm not sure how you expect to keep any privacy around these conversations.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing you say is you're wondering what that looks like because you're court mandated to be here.
Yeah, and my parents. Even if it wasn't the courts, my parents would be forcing me to be here, and probably the school administration as well.
Yep, that makes complete sense. So, I one thing I will tell you is that you still have the right to your privacy. And so, whenever I need to give updates, they'll be pretty general updates. I'll give you an example. For example, it could be something like, there was some sadness, some depression, and since we've started therapy, I've noticed that that's been improving. So it won't ever be anything specific that you've said, more so just general updates about our progress in therapy.
Okay. And what if they press you for information? And they
Yeah,
say, "What did she say about this?"
that's a good question. So, one thing that I can tell you is that I always also talk to parents about that kind of thing. I let them know, hey, I just want you to know that teens deserve their privacy too. And so I won't be telling you specifics about what we talk about in therapy. But I can help you with coping skills or parenting skills and what you can do to better help my client.
Okay.
Okay. So, um, yeah, so I think it's really important for teens to know about confidentiality. Um, any other questions before we move forward?
I don't really feel like dignifying any of that with a question.
Okay, that's okay. So, I'll go ahead and ask you, can you tell me a little bit about why you're here today?
Well, like I said, I'm forced to be here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't choose this. And the last time someone tried to force this on me, I made them quit.
Yeah. So you actually wish that you weren't here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're being forced to be here.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, can you tell me then a little bit more about why you're being forced to be here?
Um, Probably something to do with my last school.
Okay. Um, can you be a little bit more specific? What do you mean?
Well, they kicked me out for a minor misunderstanding, and now everyone's freaked out for no reason. And
Okay.
at the wrong person, I might add.
Yeah. It sounds like you feel like it's really not a big deal. Yeah.
I did what
Mm,
had to be done.
okay. Can you tell me a little bit more about what had to be done?
Well, the thing you need to understand is that nobody is going to pick on my little brother but me.
Okay. So it sounds like your little brother is really important to you.
Well, I wouldn't say that. Just that if there's anyone that is going to be anything to him, it's going to be me.
Yeah, so
Like,
you're
I
the only
do
one who
want
could pick on
him
them.
to come to harm, but that harm will come from me or no one.
Okay. So you're the only one who can pick on him.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, it does sound like though that you're pretty protective of him.
call it what you want, I guess.
Okay. Um well, tell me a little bit more about your family.
My idiot brother and my gross parents who forced me here because they're just trying to get me to be exactly like them. And I guess my uncle's kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you like your uncle.
I don't dislike him as much as the others.
Okay. Yeah. So you feel like your parents brought you to this school and because of for their own reasons, not necessarily because it's what they think was is best for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that they think it's what's best for me in their own eyes, but what they think is best for me is what they want for me, and it has nothing to do with what I know to be best for me.
I see. It's more so that you think that it's not that they don't think they're doing what's best for you. It's more so that they maybe want you to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about school?
It's this idiotic place full of idiotic people and another place where people are constantly trying to get me to be just like them in whatever form or fashion they might take. No matter who it is, there's always everyone around is trying to get me to join their stupid little thing, do stupid little things with them, be like them, and pick some group or activity to belong to where I'm just going to be them. I don't want any of that. I want them all to just leave me alone.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily care about fitting in.
Not at all. I care about the opposite.
What do you mean by that?
I feel most myself when I don't fit in.
Okay. So it's important to you that you don't fit in.
Right.
Okay. Um, so what about friends then? Tell me what that's like for you making friends. Do you have friends?
I don't need friends. Friends would slow me down.
Okay. Well, is there anyone that you could see as a potential, I don't know, maybe not a friend, but someone that you could be around?
My roommate is blonde. I feel like that says enough. So, no, but she keeps trying. I feel like one day she'll just wear me down against my will. Um, and then that beekeeper kid is fine, I guess.
Okay.
I like
Yeah,
that he
it's
likes bugs. I can get by that.
yeah. Yeah, because he also doesn't care about fitting in, it sounds like.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your relationship with your other peers.
People either ignore me or taunt me as if I could care about their opinions. So it's honestly just hilarious and beneath me.
Okay. Um, so maybe you don't care about their opinions, but I'm wondering what you do care about.
I care about myself and I care about things being right. Like, I may not care if someone's saying things to me, but if someone is picking on somebody else, I'm going to step in. I'm not going to just let that slide.
Yeah. So you have a your own moral code that you follow, and that is very important to you.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. I'm curious. I know that you aren't here of your own free will, but if you just had to continue therapy, um, what would you want to work on?
Other than finding a way to get you to run screaming from this room, I'd want to know, maybe you can help me figure out what I can say to my parents, to other people at this school to get everyone to just back off and leave me the hell alone. Maybe you could help me figure out how to tell them that and get them to actually listen.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that other than having me run out of here and like the other therapists, you would like to work on how to communicate with others to where they will hear you.
I mean, I wouldn't have put it that way, but I guess that's not wrong.
Okay. Okay, well, we're at about the end. I'm wondering if you have any questions for me before we finish today.
Well, do I have to be here if I don't want to be here?
That's a really good question. And, generally, you wouldn't have to. So, generally, you get to choose if you're coming to therapy. However, in this case, because it is court mandated, you do have to be here. I know that's definitely not what you want to hear.
Okay. Well, so if I come and I participate, you'll sign the documents and then the court will get off of me?
Yes, for, yeah,
But if it
I
was
can agree with
just my
that.
parents, if it was just my parents and not the legal system forcing me to come, would you still agree with them and force me to come?
That's a really good question. Um, when you say, would you still agree with them? What do you mean?
Like if I came in here and sat down and said, "My parents want me to be here. I don't want to be here. I have nothing to say to you." Would you continue the session?
That's a really great question. I would continue the session, and I would, it sounds like in that case what you might want to work on is, how do I advocate for myself so that I don't have to be here anymore? And that is something that I would be able to help you with.
So you'd help me like figure out a way to tell my parents I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, then maybe you can help me communicate to my parents.
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for coming in today, and I look forward to our time together, and I will see you next week.
All right.
All right. Bye. Okay. How do you think that went?
I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah. Me too. I thought
Yeah.
it went well for our first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there were two things that came to me as I was doing it. And
Mhm.
one of them is that as I was like playing Wednesday, um part of me at some points was like, I'm leaning way too hard into this and it's going to be so obvious who I'm talking about. But then other times, like, I would immediately be like, but I've heard every single one of these from teenagers. Like, this is also so typical. Like, none of it is over the top. None of it is ridiculous. None of it was outlandish. Like, it wasn't
Mhm.
even an extreme of a teenager. Not a single thing that I said was like too cartoonish to be anyone other than Wednesday. Like, it was, I've heard those exact things from teenagers plenty. And even like, and the other thing is that there were several things I realized more about Wednesday as I played her, and more about
Mhm.
like things that I can share with my clients more as I played her. And some of those were like the idea of like I understood more about the motivations behind her actions and her words in us talking about them and me saying them, but then also you reflecting back like, oh, so it means you're talking about this. And I was like, oh yeah, like it really did give me insight as Wednesday. So that was so
Yeah.
helpful. And then one thing that really stuck with me that I was like, I need to remember this forever. And it's gone. Something about the word familiarity is what I applied to it in my head.
I don't know, but as you're thinking through that, I want to also say that I also felt that way, right? I was like, yeah, it is obviously Wednesday, but also every teen goes through this. Like, and then as I was watching the show, I also was thinking, like, I was thinking of points to write down. I'm like, this is just being a teen. All of these
Yeah.
things are just being a teen. Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
interesting because Wednesday is trying so hard to be different, but she's just being a typical teen
Yeah. Oh, and that was the thing. That
in
was
many
exactly
ways.
what it is. Yeah. Of this, the familiarity thing, what I like highlighted in my mind was how the conversation we had about trying not to fit in. And but then how like the thing I said about like I don't care if people like me, but like if someone I kept having to stop myself from saying talk shit. If someone's trying to talk shit about me, I don't care. But if someone's talking shit about another person, I'm going to immediately defend them and stand up for them. And that like clicked in my head as like, that means you do care because you recognize that as hurtful. You're just pretending it's not. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my God, you're just stuck in like the familiarity of like, you don't see that there's any other way that it could be. This is
Hmm.
just what it is. Like, trying to fit in would hurt too much, and so you just have to actively not try, and that's the only way you can rationalize it in your head, is being like, it's fine that I don't have friends because I chose not to, even though it hurts you to make that choice. um
Right.
yes, so that's the epiphany that I got to, but I'm gonna have a great time talking about how this was such typical teenager stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you, the other, something that I noted too was that, I mean, in her own way, she is trying really hard. Like, I'm trying very hard to not fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, other people might be trying hard to fit in. I'm trying hard to not. So you're
Mm-hmm.
still trying hard either way. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like you're just like, I don't care. It's like, I want people to know that I'm different.
Exactly. And like everything she says about trying so hard not to fit in and to seem different and to seem everything that she is,
Hmm.
she's convincing herself. And I know that that's a cliche, but she genuinely is. She's working so hard to convince herself of that truth.
Hmm.
I think it works most of the time, which is why she keeps doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and the other thing too is like, I mean, she was very different at, she was doing a great job at being very different at her normie schools, but this school is full of people who are different. So I
Yeah,
wonder how she'll cope with that.
exactly. I think that's why it was like, aside from not wanting to like it because her parents are trying to force her into it, and like
Mhm.
just the principle of, I hate the fact that you're trying to force me into being more like you, that means she automatically in her mind is like, I have to not like this. But another layer to it is the fact that it's like a non-normie school and everyone in there is so different,
Mhm.
and to the point where they call regular non-supernatural citizens normies,
Yeah.
then she has to be extra different. And it's even harder because at a regular public school, she already was so different. And then here she's just not.
Yeah. Yeah, and something that I noted at the very end of that first episode is that she was like, "You know what? I think I'm going to like this school." But I wonder if it's not just because it's like, well, you're actually more accepted at the school.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like she's finally, and I think, in truth, we're talking about her mental state in the first episode. But if you have seen the whole series and if you're watching the whole first season, then like it does become clear that she settles in more to it as time passes. And it is much more like she's offered this safety net
Mhm.
of, hey, if you wanted to try and make friends, there are people that would be there for you. So it's
Yeah.
okay if you want to put down that armor of pretending that you don't want them, because it's safer.
So, I guess we can do short-term and long-term goals and how we would work with Wednesday in counseling. So, Haley, I'm curious, or I guess should I go first? Do you want to go first?
I'd love to hear your thoughts since you were role playing as the counselor in that scenario.
For me, it would be really my some of my short-term goals would be just continuing to build rapport. It seems like with Wednesday, gaining trust is really important. One thing that she noted is that her blonde friend, which I imagine is Enid, that she was just had to try and try and try, and eventually she would wear her down against her will. And so I think it's the same thing in counseling. Like, I would need to show up every time and just have her learn that she can trust me, and then her guard and her walls might start to slowly come down. So that would be a short-term goal for me. I think a more long-term goal might be just to delve a little bit deeper into um, vulnerability. And it seems like it's really hard for her to be vulnerable and to trust. And so I would like to better understand where that's coming from. And then maybe get her to um, learn a little bit more about her feelings and how to articulate those feelings. Um, but those are just some tentative things that I would want to work on with her. How about you, Haley?
That makes so much sense. I actually, as you say the thing about her friend wearing her down, it reminds me that I was like internally laughing to myself. I thought that was a really funny moment from the little role play that we did. Because where I got that identifier of Enid as like I can explain everything about my roommate by just calling her blonde. I got that from Wicked.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never seen.
Oh my goodness, you need to see Wicked, and then we'll do Wicked for this.
Wait, Wicked. Wait, sorry, Wicked the play
Yeah,
or
the
the
musical.
musical? Oh yeah, I've watched it. Yeah, I've
Oh,
seen it.
okay. Yeah. So there's one part in one song where oh, I can't even remember the name of the song, but it's early on. It's when Glinda and Elphaba first meet as roommates, and they're both writing home to their families about how awful the situation is. And like Glinda uses all these words to describe Elphaba, and then Elphaba just goes, "She's blonde." And I took that from that to represent Enid. I actually thought that was a perfect representation of their dynamic. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but that reminded me. I love those goal ideas. Definitely agree with you about in session in real life. It's so common for me to have a long time of like building up trust and rapport with children and teenagers, and yes, adults too. But there is a big difference when like adults come in and they are coming entirely 100% of their own volition and sitting down to say, I want to work on this. Versus children and teenagers are a little bit more commonly coming in because they were urged by their parents or schools or something else. And um, even when they come in of their own choice and like they told their parents, hey, I want to go to counseling, um, it's still different because they still come into the room kind of expecting that I'm just going to be some other authority figure in their life telling them what to do and judging them. And so you just spend so much time like building up that rapport and demonstrating to them, not just telling them that you're earning their trust and that you're giving non-judgmental support and all those things. So yeah, I definitely agree with that short-term goal. I think other ones would be kind of working on some, like you said, emotion labeling skills, but also like basic communication skills, which we touched on a little bit in the role playing of like, so you, one thing that we can't say about Wednesday is that she doesn't speak her mind. She absolutely does. And so I think to the naked eye, it might kind of look like, what are you talking about? She communicates so effectively about how she's feeling. But I think in reality, she communicates through so much sarcasm and so much disdain and dismissiveness that people might not take her seriously and people might give up around her. Not that this is her fault,
Mm-hmm.
but people, I think it's kind of a shield that like she orchestrates this to happen as a protective shield, but like she speaks so disdainfully and dismissively about anything that people might give up trying to give her an option that she agrees with. And so they don't try to say, like, okay, you don't want to go to school. I want you to go to school. How can we come up with a compromise? They just get it in their heads that there's no such thing as compromise with her. So she doesn't want to go to school. Fine, deal with it. You're going to the school.
Yeah.
So working on that, those basic, this is how you state exactly how and how you, like you said, advocate for yourself. You mentioned this in the role play part of like how you advocate for yourself and how you stand up when it really matters to you and speak up about what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not that it's your fault if other people aren't listening to you, but just there are ways to make that more likely and to help with that.
Yeah.
Especially when we're dealing with people that, like her parents, do love her very much and do want her to feel loved and feel very part of their family. It's a very loving family. Um,
Yeah.
and so we do know, because we have this dramatic irony ability to see outside of her mind and her scope, because this is a TV show based on a long history of fictional characters. We're able to take all that, and we know that her family is very loving, and that if she were to approach communication with them differently, that they would be open to it. But relevantly, if this truly was like first intake session with this new teenager. We know nothing else about her. We might not immediately know that her parents are definitely going to be receptive to that. So we can brainstorm and even role play through different possible scenarios of communicating this with her parents and how they might react. Number
Yeah.
one goal.
Rapport building, number one goal. And rapport building can take one session, it can take 20 sessions. It really just depends on the client.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For Wednesday, I could see that taking a very long time, because of the things that she stated that we saw in her first therapy session in the actual show, um, about running off previous therapists, about really not viewing the experience as important or necessary,
Mhm.
which is all completely understandable. Like, if you're not ready, you're not ready. And if you
Yeah.
don't want to do it, then nothing's gonna come of that. So yeah, I don't know quite how long it would take to build that rapport with Wednesday, but it would certainly be a while, I would guess. There might be little tests that she leaves. I've seen that
Mhm.
before with some of my clients of like dropping little comments of, "Oh, so I did this last weekend." And something that they knew that they would get in trouble with their parents for, but also something that's not technically reportable by me. And then they wait. And I view it as me passing a test when they drop something random like that so early on, and then they come back again and, like, that hasn't been shared and their parents still don't know about it kind of a
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, teens definitely have tests. I do think something that comes up for me is, and I know that you had mentioned us addressing the therapist in that first episode. I do think that having a therapist who isn't a good fit, and maybe not necessarily just a therapist who isn't a good fit, but maybe a therapist that you felt really uncomfortable with, um, that maybe wasn't doing such a great job even, um, can actually hurt your therapeutic relationship with your next therapist. And so I think that that in itself could make it take longer than it might have, um, to build a good relationship with a client, and specifically with Wednesday, if she has run off a lot of therapists, and maybe she gave them those tests and they ran away, and so she feels like, well, people will run away at the drop of a hat. Then it would take some time to build that relationship with her.
That makes a lot of sense. We couldn't say that every single therapist is the perfect fit for you and gonna work for you, and that's always gonna
Mhm.
be great, because we have our own theoretical orientations and our own approaches, and,
Mhm.
we might know of some that we wouldn't implement ourselves, that kind of a thing, for it wouldn't work for our approach or our ideology,
Mhm.
and that kind of a thing. So it's definitely not something to shy away from this conversation about having the right fit for you personally with your
Yeah.
therapist, shopping around for the right person, and feeling empowered and okay to be like, I don't want to see this particular person for this particular reason. This is not going to let me feel comfortable in the therapy space. I'm
Mhm.
not going to feel safe opening up to this person. I'm willing to try this, but I have to do it with someone else. I think that needs to be, um, talked about as an option way more.
Absolutely. So it's really important to not lose hope after you've gone to one, maybe a therapy session with a counselor who just wasn't a good fit, because there could be someone out there who is a great fit. And sometimes even just having a therapist that is a good fit can help to build that rapport more quickly. Maybe with
Mhm.
someone who was an okay fit, it might take a while to build rapport, but it's also totally possible that you find someone and you're like, this person gets me. And then it helps you feel safe a lot faster. And so knowing what you want and what you need and advocating for that is important.
So, on the topic of clients that are a really good fit for you, or like having a therapist that's a really good fit, I would love to have Wednesday as a client. I think that would be exactly my jam. I love working with teenagers. I have focused a lot on a lot of the things that we have kind of identified that we would want to work on with Wednesday with my teenagers, even young adults, even children. Um, a lot of her issues, and we kind of touched on this, but a lot of her concerns are actually quite common. and quite being a teenager. And so I would absolutely love to work with them because they're kind of right up my alley in terms of working on that self esteem, that maybe some perfectionism, maybe this armor of over her vulnerability and those kinds of things. That is right up my alley. What about for you?
I definitely would also be happy to work with Wednesday. I think we would be a great fit. Um, she's not in the things that she's struggling with aren't in my current area of specialty, which are OCD, anxiety. However, I work really well with teens and I work really well with clients that need to have someone to just hear them, understand them, and build rapport with them.
Mhm.
And then eventually, once we get to a place of like, once she might be in the preparation stage of things, and our work might change a little bit. But I definitely would love to work with her and give her some of the communication skills that might be helpful in her advocating for herself.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what kinds of skills do you think you'd want to start off with in the beginning?
Yeah. So, and this goes for people who also might relate to Wednesday, who might feel like, oh, I also really struggle with communication. Sometimes you tend to see people that struggle with just saying anything, but there's also a lot of people that struggle with maybe being a little bit too honest or too blunt. And so I would really want to give her some DBT skills. So some of the DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. But in DBT, there are a lot of interpersonal communication skills, and I would specifically want to give her two skills. So one would be a give skill, which is to be able to validate what the other person is saying. And the other would be a dear man skill. So, how to get what you want or how to say no in a way that still makes the other person, it still keeps the relationship. And so, I would definitely want to give her those skills. Um, and I would want to role play that with her. So those are two skills that I think could be helpful for her.
Yeah, I think that'd be really
How about
helpful.
you?
I I'd spend a lot of time, and now this is like one of my main focuses. I'm very person centered, so I don't often bring in like very explicit skills. And
Mhm.
so, what I would be focusing on as kind of the number one goal for the long time would be that relationship and that rapport, and getting to a point where she feels that there's someone that she can speak to that will offer absolute support, absolute lack of judgment, and who will just help her achieve some insight into the underlying patterns of her own experiences. And so I'd focus a lot more on like as we go through, she gets more and more comfortable with like this experience here is the exposure to practiced vulnerability, and then we can start talking about ways to incorporate that with other people and teaching her that, hey, you've done it. This is how you can do that with other people, that kind of a thing. So I think a lot of the time I'd focus on express, like in the beginning, I'd focus on expressive means of communication, maybe some art, to focus on, especially because there is in the show an association with her and artwork, and with music. I don't offer any kind of music therapy. It's not something I happen to be trained in, but I do offer art therapy interventions. So something I might do would be ways to express the ways that she's feeling and get them all out there in a way that feels really cathartic, but also is completely allowed and safe and protected, and not anything that she has to justify or defend or hide behind. A way for her to get out all of her thoughts and feelings on these kinds of things. I'd love to focus on that first. And then the things that I would want to work on that might be more skill based in the beginning would be like really basic boundary phrases, ways of focusing on, no, I don't want to be talked to that way. And I don't want to experience this relationship this way. And these are the kind of things that I am and am not comfortable with. So, like you said about communication skills and those kinds of things. But I also want to focus on, I find that something that's really helpful for building self confidence in teenagers is reflecting on counteracting some minimization, so focusing on the things that they can be excited about and proud of in themselves and in their lives, that they currently are like, I hear this all the time of, oh, you did well in school this week. What did you do? Oh, well, I got a 98 on a test, but like, I have to. That's school. No, that's you minimizing, and you should be proud of that. 98% of all the answers you got correct, that is incredibly high. That is incredibly impressive, and you deserve to feel proud of that, and those kinds of things. So I think a lot of reframing of what we can focus on that actually does feel uplifting as opposed to minimizing.
I like that it's very experiential. So
Mm,
what we are doing in the room and how changing that can then reflect a change in the outside world,
yes.
like a change in your life. And so yeah, I really like that. Those are some ways that we would work with Wednesday, and Haley and I are, while we're colleagues and we're friends, we also are just in general very different therapists. So Haley is very, very person centered. And Haley, can you tell us just a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because I love this opportunity because I have noticed actually a phrase from the person centered approach start going around TikTok lately and used incorrectly. So I love this
Oh,
opportunity to
n-
address it. Um,
not uncommon with
I
mental health today.
know we'll definitely have to talk about more of those.
I'll take it.
Um, but person centered approach is based on the original ideas of Carl Rogers. And it's come far. It has had multiple iterations. Um, but the general idea is this fact that when a person is faced with their biggest self doubts, fears, vulnerabilities, and difficult emotions that we all go through, with someone there who will support them through it, who will be more reassuring and encouraging than dismissive and demotivating, who will allow them to express all of their thoughts and feelings, even if they're less than desirable, even if they're scary or quote unquote weird or anything like that, with support and open curiosity as opposed to dismissiveness, disgust, rejection, those kinds of things. Um, then that person will learn to build the confidence in themselves to figure out what their own goals are and achieve basically what we call congruence, which is like my ideal self is in line with my actual self. I can figure out how I can make what I wish my life could be my reality through this self-confidence and this trust in myself kind of a thing. So a phrase that has been taken from that is unconditional positive regard. And to clarify what that phrase means is this idea that every human has maybe some like intrusive thoughts that are really vile, or just some opinions, thoughts, feelings, past actions that have been regrettable. And unconditional positive regard means that the therapist or a parent, this is also a role that a parent is meant to take, um, will look at someone's maybe errors, mistakes, regrets, and face them with, you can make mistakes, and that doesn't make you any less deserving of love, or that doesn't make you any less earning of a second chance, of learning new things and changing. Um, but unfortunately, I've seen a few TikToks, and not everyone's getting this wrong, but I have seen several TikToks where it's like, imagine that this, horrible person who's done horrible things, like some fictional dictator, has been faced with unconditional positive regard, meaning that they're told that they're perfect even when they do horrible things. That is definitely not what that is. Because it's not about pretending that mistakes or errors or bad thoughts and feelings don't happen. It's about acknowledging them and saying that just because they happen, that doesn't mean you are a person that is undeserving of change and redemption if you try.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that explanation, and also for clearing up that misconception, or yeah, going around online.
Yeah, thank you for my
Um,
quick soapbox rant. I have plenty of those.
um, yeah. So Haley focuses a lot on. Haley is very person centered, whereas I am more focused on the cognitive behavioral kinds of therapies. So CBT, dialectical behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, uh, in that realm. And so it's very based on changing or noticing and accepting thoughts, um, and how those thoughts affect how you feel, and then how both those thoughts and feelings affect how you behave. And so sometimes I will focus on either changing thoughts or analyzing thoughts. Where are they coming from? What's the core belief that I have created or that I learned? And how is that influencing the thoughts I'm having? But I don't just focus on changing thoughts. It's also a lot about mindfulness. So accepting thoughts as they are, and then just letting thoughts be thoughts. But sometimes with OCD specifically, I will focus on behaviors. So, how instead of focusing on the thoughts, we'll just skip all that and I focus in on behavior. So, how do we change behaviors to then change our emotions and our thoughts? And so it can go a lot of different ways, but that ends up meaning that I'm very skills based. I ask a lot of questions and I'm like very much a collaborator, but also an investigator. And so that definitely shapes how I do therapy. So our approaches are very different. So the way that we would work with clients is very different. And it doesn't mean that one is wrong or right. It just means that they're different.
Yeah.
Um,
I would even argue
yeah.
that there's several instances of overlap between them. Like, as a pretty much person-centered therapist, I do incorporate lots of other methodologies as well, including there are times that I have clients that we use dialectical behavior therapy. It
Hmm.
works great for very specific presentations, presenting concerns. And so marrying that with the person-centered approach has been very effective, I found. But then additionally, one thing that you mentioned of like analyzing your thoughts, I actually did this in my example earlier of working with Wednesday, and I was talking about minimization is literally one of the common labels of a type of cognitive distortion, from the CBT handbook. And so there's ways that we can use very similar ideals and just kind of sometimes they just get presented differently. But a lot of those things have a lot of overlap, and you can be I think it's more common nowadays to see someone who's very integrative as a therapist.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so that is gonna be it for today, guys. So that's our first podcast. It's probably gonna be a little clunky, but we will get better at this as we keep making more podcasts. I'm curious about um, your thoughts. Also, if there's anything that you want to plug before we finish today.
Um, I think that I might plug our Instagram account. We have created an Instagram account, a TikTok account, and a YouTube account. And I mean, some of you may be seeing this from the YouTube account. That's fine. So we have those. It's called Character Clinic across all domains. I think on Instagram and TikTok, it's at Character Clinic Pod. If you want to follow us there, then you can get updates about when new episodes are going to be released. You can get maybe fun teaser information there. And perhaps most importantly, you can leave us comments, you can leave us DMs, you can request certain characters, certain shows, movies, books, video games, whatever kind of media. But then additionally, if you have questions for us or things that you want us to talk about, be like, hey, I want to know about this experience in therapy. We'd be happy to kind of answer some questions as well, and like as Karla has mentioned, demystify the process. I would only say please clarify whether you'd like that question to be answered anonymously or whether you'd like us to share who said that in.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for plugging the Instagram. And yes, we would really love suggestions, questions, anything that we're curious to hear from all of you. I would like to plug my own Instagram. So I'm at on Instagram. I'm at Karla Pineda OCD. And then TikTok, I'm at Karla Pineda LPC. I provide a lot of content, educational content around OCD, social anxiety, and just anxiety in general. But also, if you are 16 plus and you're looking for a therapist, if you're specifically looking for someone who specializes in exposure and response prevention, I would love to do maybe a 15-minute consultation with you to see if we're a good fit. So yeah, you could go onto my website. It's layerscs.com and book a consultation.
For what it's worth, I highly recommend Karla. She's at the top of my list for referrals.
That's it for today, guys, and we will see you next time. Haley, who are we going to be doing next time?
Well, I love the drama and the mystery and the intrigue, so I'm not going to tell you which character we're going to be doing next time. But what I can tell you is we're going to be doing Heartstopper.
Okay, I was going to say I can't tell you the character because I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
All right, bye everybody.